Welcome everybody to the latest ECIST webinar, where ECIST being the Emergency Care Improvement Support Team, a pragmatic group of multidisciplinary team that tries to spread good practice around urgent emergency care across England and further. So delighted today to have Dr. Anas Nader with us. He's first of all, he's an ED doctor. But he's also the CEO and co-founder of Patchwork. So today he's going to talk to us and to you primarily about flexible working, but also new models of working in environments like ED, and really looking forward to his presentation. And at the end, Anas will I'll probably ask a few questions. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Pete. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today, and really excited to share some of our work, but really to kind of give a bit of a background about the changing environment in the workforce in the NHS. And really, I want to start off by talking about my background. So as you said, I am an NHS doctor. I trained at the Imperial College Medical School and then worked as a doctor in London since 2014. Around 2016, 2017, I'd taken a year out of training and was a Darcy Fellow in Clinical Leadership, as well as NHS Clinician Entrepreneur Fellow, where I worked at Chelsea Westminster Hospital. And that's kind of where my involvement in the world of flexible working and trying to address staffing issues started. And out of that experience and in collaboration with Chelsea, I co-founded Patchwork with my co-founder Jing, and since then we've been growing in the NHS, trying to work around flexible working. So I want to start off with kind of giving a quick snippets of a few stories that are reflective of the diverse faces of our modern workforce. And it's just really to set the scene why flexibility matters and why this has to be addressed across all our organizations. So I'm going to start talking about a few examples. Now, these are real people. The names have changed to protect their identity, but these are real stories of people I know and have worked with. So Sarah is a TNO surgeon. She completed her medical school. She did her foundation years, as most of us would. She did her core training in surgery, went on to become a registrar in TNO, and then became a consultant. So this is the traditional route, straight from medical school into being a consultant, roughly around 11 or 12 years of training, no gaps, and on to be a consultant in London. Now, Sarah is a dying breed. She is a rare phenomenon nowadays. Very few doctors nowadays take the route that Sarah has taken, as it used to be in the past. We're seeing now more of these examples. Now, Tom is an A&E Middle-grade. Again, completed his medical school, done his foundation year training, but then went in and started doing his F3 and F4 years, often colloquially referring to the years that people take out of training once they've completed their foundation year. Foundation years, F1 and F2s. And then he started working in different A&Es with several agencies, then taking a couple of long breaks in between, one of them to plan for his wedding and get married, and the other one to do a bit of traveling afterwards. He's come back to do a CT1 and CT2 training in medicine, but again, took another break after that to look after his newborn. Lola is a midwife. She, again, completed her training as a midwife, worked as a midwife for a few years, but then after an exciting career as a midwife, decided to retrain as a software engineer. And mainly because she got interested in it, she had some colleagues and friends who were coders and developers, and she wanted really to have more of a portfolio career. She joined her local bank to continue to work flexibly as she was studying for this intensive course, and now works as a software engineer at Patchwork, actually. She's one of our employees. She writes codes for us in developing our products, but she remains clinically active and would love to continue remaining clinically active. So she does not want to give up her clinical work as a midwife. Mohamed is a Paeds registrar. He also completed his medical schools, done his F1, F2, and an extra year of locuming as an F3, went to do his core training, and again, Unfortunately, his dad got unwell, and he's the sole carer for his dad, so he had to leave his training, had to give up his training number, actually, to be able to work flexibly while looking after his dad. And he continues to work as a career locum at the registrar till today. Now, the reason why I'm bringing all these examples is just to show you that clinicians have very diverse pathways, from graduating from medical school or nursing school, and all the way towards retirement. And that diversity in pathways, whether it's due to lifestyle reasons, desire to have a portfolio careers, or other commitments, social and financial commitments, often pushes them outside of the system. Often they have to work outside of the system to accommodate for these requirements. So what is really the challenge from a system-wide point of view? This is a report that Health Education England and the Foundation Programme puts out every year. And I want you to focus on the bottom end of that screen. If you see at the lower end, say subtotal or other destinations, it's basically referring to the clinicians that what have they done after the FY2 training. And if you notice the trend from 2011 to 2018, we're seeing an increasing number of clinicians leaving their training after F2, not entering into core training or GP training. So you can see in 2011, it was about 28% of clinicians. By 2018, it was 62% of clinicians. And that's 2 years ago. And 2019 and 2020, we'll see continually the same trend. So we're looking at about 2/3 of our foundation year doctors not continuing into core training or GP training. That is a big problem because it's affecting how we plan for consultant books down the line. What used to take about 10 to 12 years to train a consultant, we're looking at a 50 to 20-year pathways now because of all these gap years doctors are taking. Now, the 62% we see in that chart, quite a few of them will come back to training eventually. But one of their frustrations is they would have gone out to work as clinical fellows or as bank or agency workers for a while, but the years of experience they would have collected as flexible workers is often not reflected or acknowledged in them going back to training. So the experience they've collected being flexible workers is not always captured. And that's one of their frustrations because they go back to training being a CT1 doctor right after F2, when in fact they probably have a lot more experience than most CT1s would have had. So that's one area of the challenge. The second area is how rigid our training programs are designed and our rotas are designed. It's quite rigid. We all know stories of clinicians who literally who can't even go to their own weddings or plan their own weddings because they don't even know what their rota looks like beyond the next 4 months. And that is becoming increasingly a problem for many workers who are choosing to leave their rigid training program to find more autonomy in their career path, often choosing something like the Caesar route, or just to be able to balance life with work. So this is an increasing problem. It has been acknowledged across the board with Health Education England or NHSI and NHSE that this has to be addressed to ensure that we're retaining the clinicians we're recruiting. We're stopping the bleed within the system rather than just trying to keep on recruiting from locally or internationally, trying to address why clinicians are leaving the NHS or leaving full-time work. And in this case, just kind of a reminder that whilst our NHS clinical workforce are not just nurses, doctors, pharmacists, and HPs, they are parents, carers, humanitarians, entrepreneurs, artists, and world travelers. They're all multi-dimensional people who have very complex requirements, and we need to accommodate that in this competitive environment where many other industries are competing for our workforce, trying to lure them in to these industries, accommodating for their requirements and accommodating for their flexibility and their portfolio careers. However, there is some good news. We are seeing changes. We are seeing trends, and I'm going to talk about a few of those. First of all, we're seeing a lot more grassroots movements like Flex NHS gaining traction across the country and making quite a lot of media presence and putting out reports and creating a little bit of a movement that's demanding more flexibility as the norm rather than the exception in the NHS. And they are gaining traction and being heard, as I've noticed recently. We're also seeing from the top down appointments of the likes of Jane Galloway as the head of flexible working for NHSE and NHSI, clearly sending a signal to the market that flexible working is a top priority for the NHS. We're seeing more trusts developing bespoke fellowship programs for junior doctors, especially in ED and acute medicine. I know many trusts in London, teaching university trusts in London, that offer a hybrid fellowship program that allows doctors to do 6 months in A&E and 6 months in ITU, or similarly with ACCS type placements, using bespoke fellowship programs that are run and managed by the trusts locally rather than centrally by Health Education England. And finally, we're seeing a lot more investment in growing the staff banks and local staff banks using good technology to enable better flexible working. So how are we at Patchwork helping in this challenge? So kind of a brief background about Patchwork. We are an award-winning technology-enabled bank service. We connect clinicians directly to vacant shifts, bypassing the need for a middleman, bypassing the need for expensive agencies. From the worker's point of view, it's about giving them autonomy and control by working directly with NHS trusts. And from the employer's point of view, it's about cutting out the agency cost and really having, again, better control in choosing who to work in the trusts. We were built, as I already said earlier, by doctors, but we're also built in partnership with Chelsea Westminster Hospital. So we co-design and co-produce quite a lot of our products and features with the end user. We're also co-owned by the British Medical Journal, one of our investors, which is the commercial arm of the BMA, but it really allows us to help support the recruitment of flexible workers into the NHS trusts we work with. Briefly, we have 3 core products. The Workers app is what the clinician would be using to find NHS trusts, create a profile, upload their documents, and join these banks and ensuring that they're compliant. And again, self-management by booking shifts at their own time with their own requirements, and also signing off their timesheets, ensuring they can track their payments, a big anxiety for many flexible workers. The second element of the product is our Employers Hub. It allows NHS trusts to manage their flexible workforce end-to-end, all the way from recruitment down to creating a rules engine that allows clinicians to self-book into shifts, and all the way to managing timesheets and payroll. Finally, a really key element to our offering is Patchwork Insights, which is really about creating an MI reporting tool that looks both retrospectively and prospectively for NHS trusts on their vacancies, their spends, and really understanding the behavior of their workforce around the system. I want to talk about a little bit how we recruit to the banks, and we'll talk about a few case studies in a minute. But really, we always start with working with the trust's existing workforce. Because again, it's about capturing your existing workforce, capitalizing on your clinicians, ensuring that we stop the bleed, and engaging better with existing workforce and growing that bank. We then start connecting trust to our growing bank of workers that are already on the app. We have a community of 10,000 plus workers already, 10,000 plus doctors on the app who are joining NHS Trust across the system using the app. But then we also start creating bespoke campaigns, working with the BMJ and BMJ Careers, and on their online and offline channels to promote flexible working opportunities that are found within the NHS Trust that we partner with. We work across the country, in the south and the north, in big urban cities, and as well as rural areas, pretty much really anywhere that there's an NHS Trust. We probably can help and support in their flexible working requirements. I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies. I'll start with Chelsea Westminster Hospital, our first trust, and the journey we went on with them. A little bit of background. The goal was really to start with the 250 doctors that we had and grow that bank to much more than that. Within 18 months, we grew the bank to over 2,000 doctors. That's quite an increase in the size of the bank. Quite a lot of that from their own substantive workers, but also we managed to recruit larger community of workers in the region and retained a lot of doctors who left their F2 training or core training but remained in the bank as flexible workers. We increased their fill rates by over 90%, ensuring that they've achieved more than £1.2 million in savings from agency spend. And we see year on year, even 2 or 3 years on, continuously reducing agency spending, continuously growing the local bank and increasing their fill rates. There is an element of price control because that's often quite a challenge with a lot of employers when they think about flexible working. A big question comes around how much are we paying up for that, whether it's agency or bank. Aintree had is a great case study on that because Aintree did not have any element of harmonization of rates. Shifts were put out quite late, often resulting in escalations, breaching capped rates on agency, and really having poor financial control around spend. It really started with Aintree at growing the bank. So really, the journey of the change management we go with every NHS trust often starts with stakeholder engagement, process mapping, and focusing on growth in the bank. So with Aintree, for example, within the first 6 months, they saw close to 275% growth on their bank. That's again mostly by growing the internal bank as well as recruiting externally. As you can see in this graph, the growth in the bank was across all grades, junior doctors and consultants. What does that mean? Well, that meant that the fill rates in 2018 compared to the fill rates in 2019, fill rates in 2019 compared to 2018 increased dramatically. So month on month, comparing like for like, regardless of the season, we're seeing a lot more doctors booking in the bank and a lot earlier than ever. So we talk about early bookings by bank workers at the agreed rates in the region, no changes to their rates, but certainly a massive reduction in escalations. So the second graph I'm going to talk about here is talk about the reduction in escalations. So that's not because doctors' rates have changed. Doctor rates haven't changed at all. It's about reducing the need to escalate last-minute bookings, whether on bank or on agency, due to poor planning or poor engagement with the clinicians. So by ensuring that you have the 3 key ingredients, you can reduce the escalation. The first ingredient, growing the bank. It's a numbers game. You need to have as many flexible workers on your bank ready to pick up these shifts when you need them. The second ingredient, ensuring that you have adequate lead times, putting out your shifts at least 6, if not 12 weeks in advance, ensuring that there's plenty of time for clinicians to browse and find these shifts and book them well ahead of time, reducing that need for last-minute, urgent, panicking escalations. The third ingredient is really making sure that all the stakeholders in the trusts understand the processes, are engaged from day one, so that they're aware of good practices and good habits to ensure that it continues to be implemented sustainably over a long period of time. Because at the end of the day, technology is simply an enabler of change. It is not the leader of change. The change will have to come from within the trusts, but it's about aligning all the stakeholders, going through a good change management process, and then obviously using technology as an enabler. Finally, I'm going to just show one last graph, really talk about the user experience. And I know this word is kind of used by a lot of tech companies, but there's something really to be said about delightful experience that allows people to engage better, reducing the friction in the system, reducing the anxieties of poor visibility or not really trusting that you are doing the right thing and that you are picking the right shift and you are going to get paid for the right hourly rates. So, this is a survey that the trust ran itself with its doctors and managers, and across the board, whether it's issues about visibility, control, experience, we've seen dramatic increases across the board. And a delightful, positive user experience is always a key to having sustainable long-term improvements. So these are the 2 case studies I wanted to cover. There's another really case study that recently we've started drafting with York Teaching Hospitals, where what it really focused on is the amount of time we managed to save administrators, whether in the front line, like A&E managers and A&E admins, as well as HR teams centrally. Looking at how we can reduce the amount of time they're spending doing repetitive admin tasks. And we looked at a minimum about 100 hours a month reduced in managing the bank or managing day-to-day activities, and really diverting that attention to high-value tasks like recruitment, engagement, and focusing on the elements that we needed really administrators to focus on. On that note, what's next? So what's next really is not only about Patchwork, it's really what's next in this market. What's next that we're expecting to see in the next 12 to 24 months. So this is not wishful thinking. We're talking about things that we're seeing, the early signs of that we're hoping to either Patchwork delivers or generally the markets deliver in the next 24 months. One of the things that remain a big challenge for true flexibility is passporting. So, if we're thinking about bank or NHS staff banks as the employer of choice for flexible workers, what we're really trying to say is we want these workers to work via bank or for agencies. But one of the things that agencies remain, or one of the advantages that agencies still have over banks, is that universal passporting they provide. As a bank worker, or as a flexible worker, I can join an agency and I can work anywhere in the NHS. However, as a bank worker, I have to go through a laborious onboarding process with every single employer and every single NHS trust. And to truly shift the needle on that, we need to improve our passporting. So we're starting to work with digital identity specialists who provide really clever technology underpinned by blockchain identity verification technology to allow clinicians to be able to be passported quite easily from one NHS trust to another. That can be done in NHS trusts who are building collaborative banks in regions like ICSs and STPs, or even beyond that, when NHS trusts on a universal level adopt such technology to allow clinicians to truly be passported from one trust to another and streamlined into departments without having to go through that repetitive, laborious compliance checks, right to work checks. So that's an area that we're going to probably see some exciting stuff happening in the next 12 to 24 months. Another one is looking at flexible training. So what I was describing so far, it's flexibility using the bank, the medical bank, as a vehicle for flexibility, but that's one approach for flexible working. I'm a strong believer that our training programs need to become more flexible in their own right. So a doctor does not have to become a bank worker to be a flexible worker. You can remain a core trainee or a registrar trainee, but able to work flexibly. And I want to differentiate that clearly between flexibility and less than full time. Because really what less than full time gives you, if you're a parent or a carer, it gives you less hours to work, but it still puts you in a rigid rota. So you might be 60% FTE, full-time equivalent, so you're less than full-time, but you're still with a fixed rota with very little flexibility. And what we're talking about here is whether you are a full-time trainee or less than full-time trainee, you need to be able to work flexibly, where some clinicians will only be able to work on weekends for a certain period of time, or only be able to work weekdays and need to be available for their family on weekends, or might not be able to do night shifts for a certain period of time. And that needs to be something that training programs and deaneries can offer, so that the clinicians are not forced to leave training, give up their training number to remain and only find a way to remain as a clinician through the bank or agency. So that's the second area that we will see hopefully some movement. And I know Health Education England and many other deaneries are looking at pilots to roll out flexible training. Last but not least, skills-based matching. So actually this is something we started piloting in A&E, and we're looking at many of our trusts, we're looking at that as a new way of engaging workers, especially in departments like A&E. So traditionally, clinicians or healthcare workers are matched directly to shifts based on their professional designation. So doctors book doctors shifts, nurses book nurses shifts, PAs book PA shifts. But what we're seeing right now in departments like A&E, that there are certain types of shifts that truly any healthcare workers with the right skills should be able to work that shift. So it's about matching these workers to their skills, not to their professional designations. So in A&E, for example, we've created a set of shifts that can allow a doctor, an EMP, or a PA to all have equal priority to booking that shift. Any one of these three groups of workers can find that same shift and self-book into that shift when they're available. We're rolling that out now in other areas like Northampton and other parts of London because we're seeing a growing demand for that model. And we're hoping to see that model move outside of A&E, but A&E is a great area for piloting such concepts. And certainly in community and GP practices, we'll see more of that as well. So skills-based matching rather than professional designation matching is another trend that we're really excited about seeing. And I think that will have a real dent in the problem of flexibility. So that's pretty much most of what I want to talk about today. And I hope that gave you ideas about what the challenges are, where technology can bring some changes, and what the future looks like. I'm going to leave you with some final thoughts. So I'm sure many of you have seen the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it really talks about the key fundamentals, the building blocks that we need as human beings to achieve self-actualization. And that every single step of the way is needed before we reach that final level. So I've gone ahead and rejigged the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm going to call it the flexible workers hierarchy of needs. And here it is. So it starts off with change in policy and culture. So the NHS needs to truly commit itself to flexible working, both for trainees and for substantive workers who are non-trainees, to ultimately increase the clinician's autonomy. So it needs to start with a policy change and a cultural shift. Next, we need to start investing in real tools that allow flexibility, whether it is flexible e-portfolios for trainees, better passporting that allows streamlining across different employers, digital bank solutions that we talked about earlier. Investing in these tools as enablers of flexibility needs to be the next step. Only when we invest in these tools and we have the right policy and culture do we achieve true flexibility for all of our NHS workers. And only when they are flexible can they achieve their self-actualization, where they can remain like Lola, a midwife who's working flexibly but also is excited to be a software engineer, or Mohamed, who's able to look after his elderly dad whilst remaining a trainee, or Tom, who's able to travel the world and work with MSF every once in a while but still remain a full-time worker in the NHS when he's back in the country. And these complex requirements to achieve their self-actualization needs to happen only when we have achieved all these different levels in that hierarchy of needs. We need to remember that our workforce love the NHS and they want to stay in the NHS and they want to work with the NHS, but they are at a breaking point. And the more of them leave the NHS, the ones that are left behind are under even more pressure and often will end up leaving eventually if that's not addressed. So flexibility must be at the heart of the NHS recruitment and retention strategy. And I say retention because that's an element that without flexibility, we will never achieve that retention, no matter how much we recruit locally or internationally. And then ultimately that will make the NHS the employer of choice for a much happier workforce. And that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anas. That was a fantastic presentation, and you covered so many areas which are, we as a team and lots of other people are so passionate about. Can I ask you a few questions?
Go ahead.
I mean, I think you've covered a lot of them, but I'm just thinking, because I agree with your sort of finishing thoughts there about, people are sort of at a breaking point. But say if I was chief executive, and I don't know, I hear of a very, difficult problems with ED workforce and things like that. Where would you start? What top? I'm really busy as a chief executive. What couple of top tips would you give me of where to start in terms of workforce priorities?
So, well, I actually would always start with engaging with your workforce today. Really speaking to the ones on the ground, on the front line, really understanding what their requirements are and what their challenges are. So really it's about, so if I'm a CEO of the NHS Trust today and I'm aware that my agency spends in A&E is really high, rather than, often many NHS managers and leaders start focusing on capped rates and frameworks and how can we control and rein in the agency spend. Whilst that is needed, obviously, it's really needs to start by engaging with your workforce and understanding where their requirements are. So speaking to our trainees, speaking to our substantive consultants, and understanding where can we support them in their journey to achieve their better working environment. And then I will start looking at innovative programs that attract clinicians to our departments and then to our trusts. So there's quite a lot of trusts who have started rolling out fellowship programs, clinical fellowship programs. As I described earlier, King's College has a pretty popular one that allows clinicians who are out of training to come in and do different exciting work in the trauma units and aesthetics department, and then another 6 months in ITU and then 6 months in A&E, really looking at these programs and seeing best practices that we can see in some areas of the NHS and adopting them. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to start from scratch. We just need to find those spots of innovation and best practices and adopting them, customizing them and for the requirements of the trust, but really adopting some of these best practices and creating these fellowship programs that attract clinicians who are out of training, but also allowing that fellowship program to be recognized as part of the training is a great first step. Investing in good tools and good technology, whether it's e-portfolio tools, passporting tools, bank tools, is absolutely needed. Doctors often complain about how their life outside of the NHS feels like it's very futuristic and 21st century. But once they come into their day job every day, they put their phone down, they pick up their 1900s bleep, and go back to their very old EPR systems. That is, if anything, slowing them down, not speeding them up. And that frustration that many workers in the front line have with technology is really needs to be addressed with better tech, but also co-designing the solutions with them rather than trying to parachute expensive, clunky tech into the system. So really investing in better tools is another area to focus on. And again, there are areas of best practice that we can learn from, but it's about really trying to take that first step.
Brilliant. Do you know what? I think you've sort of already answered all my questions. I love that start with the people who the job bit. I love the use of technology. It always surprises me that, we work on our iPhones, our iPads and everything so technologically savvy, and then we go into a hospital and it can be a little bit behind as well. I love the idea of passporting as well, but I love all of those things. Anas, it's a real pleasure to speak to you. Now, we've got Anas's email address, we've got the Patchwork website, then also Anas's Twitter handle, and also you'll see the Patchwork handle earlier on in the presentation. Anas, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.